We're going to do a flipped lesson on section 3 of chapter 4, writing rules for linear functions. So you're going to write this all down in your notebook. If you need to pause the video, you're going to pause the video. But I need to see all these notes in your notebook. So you're going to write this all down. I'm not wanting you to understand the material completely, but I want you to have a general understanding so that tomorrow during class we can try some problems and you can ask questions and we can discuss this. So writing rules for linear functions. We've been working on linear functions, so now you're going to write rules, or you're going to write it in this form of y equals mx plus b. So you have to know how to be able to take a line, find the slope, the y-intercept, and write something in this functional form. You do not need to copy down the picture. That's just to give you a visual. I will go over each piece as we go. So write down the title and rules for linear functions, writing an equation in the form of y equals mx plus b. But remember, x and y are points on a line. M is your slope, and b is your y-intercept. Okay, so write that down. If you need to pause the video, pause the video. So write this all down. Example 1, writing a rule from words. So we're going to take a word problem and write it in the form of y equals mx plus b. So copy this down, or you can abbreviate it, right? We have a rate for internet access is $15 each month, plus 25 cents per hour of use. So I'm going to write a function rule that shows how the monthly bill depends upon the number of hours used. So I'm going to pay based on how many hours I used, in addition to the 15 hours I have to pay each month. So we're going to write this in function form. Again, if you need to pause the video, pause it. So my monthly bill, as I said, equals my $15 a month plus 25 cents per hour. So I can write that in the y equals mx plus b form, where y is my monthly bill. I have 0.5 per hour plus the 15. There I go. I've written it in a y equals mx plus b form. So some questions that I might ask you is, first, what is the initial cost and the rate of change? So the initial cost, well, that was the $15 you have to pay. That's your flat fee. And the rate of change is 0.25 or 25 cents per hour. So please copy this all into your notebook. Again, if you need to pause the video, pause the video. When you're ready to move on, go ahead and move on. Okay, now you're going to do one on your own. So you're going to write all this down. An orchestra buys music stands for $42 each, with $298 in its bank account. So write a function rule that shows how the account balance depends on the number of stands bought. So you might have to think about some things like, what are the initial value and the rate of change of the function? So you should see a text box on the right. You're going to write down how you think you would write down that function. And then I'll give you an answer. So first, write down what you think. Okay, now you're going to correct your answer. So here's your function, right? So write a function rule that shows how the account balance, here's my account balance, depends on, so here's what I started with, minus $42 a stand. My initial value was $298, and the rate of change is negative $42. So go ahead and write that in your notebook. If you have a question about it, write down the question on the side of your notebook so we can go over it during class tomorrow. Okay, so we just wrote a function from a word problem. Now we're going to use a table. So copy this down, including the table. Don't skip out on the table. That's probably the most important part. So I'm going to give you some steps. So you should have these steps down so that when you go to do the homework, you can just look at the steps. So I want to write a function rule for the data in the table. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to find the slope. I can pick any 2 points. So remember, the slope is the difference in the change. So I took 8 minus 6 and 0 minus a minus 1, which gives me 2 over 1. So we know our slope is 2. Then I want to look at the table because I want to find out where my y-intercept is. So if I look at the table, I look to see if x, or when x equals 0. That's my y-intercept. So at this point, it's 8. So now I can write down my function rule in the form of y equals mx plus b. So y equals 2 because my slope was 2 and my y-intercept was 8. So I can find all of that from my table. You would need to show some work to figure out how you got your answers. Again, if you have questions, you're going to write those down on the side of your notebook, and then we can go over those tomorrow during class. Okay, now you're going to do one on your own. So this table shows the number of inches of snow that fell during a snowstorm. So we want to write as a function rule. So our function rule, remember, needs to be in the form of y equals mx plus b. Okay, so what are the initial values? So you need to find out what your y-intercept is and the rate of change, or the slope. Okay, so you're going to need to somehow work your way backwards to see when x equals 0, what is y. Okay, so you should see a text box on the right. So I want you to write something as y equals, you should have some sort of slope, x plus your y-intercept. So that's how your answer should look. Okay, so here's my answer. So I worked my way backwards. Right here, I'm taking away 3 each time. So if I take away 3, I'm at 0. Each time I'm taking away 4.5, so it's 0, 0. So that I know that my plus b is going to be a plus 0. Slope, I look at the rate of change, right? So I could look at, well, we could look at actually this. Let's do 12. Let's not do that. Let's do 12 minus 9 over 18 minus 13.5. Okay, so what do we get? That's going to be 3 over 4.5. Oh, that's kind of a wonky number. But if I simplify that, or if I get rid of the decimal and multiply, I get 30 over 45. Okay, yeah, I know my screen just cleared because I decided I needed to redo this. So we figured out that if we worked our way backwards, we got 0, 0. And then, I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, we want y over x. So we actually wanted the 18 minus the 13.5 over 12 minus 9. So then I get 4.5 over 3. But I can't have a fraction or a decimal in a fraction. So I have 45 over 30. So 30 goes into 45 one time. And you're left with 15 over 30, which is 1.5. So that's how you get your slope, or your x. And remember, it's plus 0. So that's my function. Okay, now I want to write an equation from a graph. So write this down. Please copy down the picture of the graph because you're going to really need that to help. So here are the steps. Okay, so I know my graph is linear, right? So I know it's in y equals mx plus b. So I need to figure out first, maybe, well, where's the y-intercept? Okay, so the line intersects the y at the 4, right there. So I know my b is 4. Okay, and I need to get the slope. And the slope is 8 over 4, 2. Well, where did I get that from? Let me show you. So in this line, you can see that I go up to 8. So that distance is 8. And then over here I go over 4. So it's 8 over 4 to get that. And then I can rewrite this in slope-intercept form. Y equals 2x plus 4. So here is 8. There is 4. 8 over 4 equals 2. That's where we got the slope from. And the y-intercept came from that y-intercept. Okay, so you're going to probably end up practicing some of these. Okay, so try this one on your own. I need you to copy the graph into your notebook. I put those big blue dots so you know where you can look for your slope. So remember, you want to write it in y equals mx plus b form. So I should see your answer. I should see y equals in this form, looking at what we just did. So try your best. So you should see a text box on the right. That way I can see what you can do and what we need to work on. Okay, so here's my answer, right? Here's my y-intercept. And then here's my slope. Right, so that's 2, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 2 over 5. How did it get it to be a negative? Well, I went down to get over. Then I also see my lines going down. So I can rewrite in y equals mx plus b form. So correct that if you need to. Otherwise, you may move on. Okay, this is our last type of writing an equation. So I'm going to give you the slope and 1 point. Okay, so I'm going to write the equation in y equals mx plus b with the given slope. Okay, so you're going to plug in the point that was given, right? So they're going to give you 1 point and you're going to solve for b. So you can write all this down, and then on the next slide I'll use an example. So just have all these steps. You're going to then rewrite the equation, use slope and b in that form. Sorry, I went kind of fast. Okay, so write those down. If you need to pause me, pause me. When you're ready to move on, I'm going to give you an example. So here's my example. I'll write this down. Okay, so here's my slope, and here's my 1 point. So remember the first step was to write down or use my point. So I'm going to use 0 for the y and 5 for the x. I know the slope, now I can solve for b. Okay, so now I know that. Then I can rewrite it in this form. So remember, this is an x and a y point, and you can plug those in for x and y, and then solve for your b, and then you can rewrite your equation. Okay, now that you know how to do that, you're going to use this to write the equation of a line using slope and 1 point. So you're going to use a y equals mx plus b. So remember, you're going to plug in that point into your y and x to solve for b, and then you're going to rewrite the whole equation. So go ahead and try that. You should see a text box on the right. Right, so here's how I did it. There's my answer. So check my answer with your answer. If you have a question, write that on the side of your notebook. There's one more technique, but we're going to go over that tomorrow during class.